The fluorescent lights hummed softly in the tall glass building, casting reflections across the spotless marble floor. Daniel pushed his cart down the long corridor, mop in hand, his work boots echoing against the tiles. It was late, the kind of hour when most people had already gone home to their families. But for Daniel, nights were when work began. He didn't complain. He couldn't. Ever since his wife passed away, every paycheck meant survival for him and his son. That son, Liam, tagged along tonight, as he often did when there was no one else to watch him. Liam wasn't the type to complain either. He knew his dad worked hard, harder than anyone he knew, and he wanted to help, even if helping meant sitting quietly in the corner with his backpack while Daniel scrubbed and swept. Tonight, though, Liam's restless legs carried him further than usual. After finishing his homework, he zipped up his bag and walked down the hall, curiosity tugging him toward the lobby. The lobby was massive, with ceilings that stretched high, walls of glass revealing the shimmering city beyond. At first, it looked empty, but then he saw her. A girl about his age sat curled up on one of the sleek leather couches, her small frame hunched forward, eyes glued to the floor. Her fingers twisted together nervously, and her lips trembled, as if words wanted to come out but were trapped inside. Liam slowed his steps, unsure if he should approach. But there was something about the way she sat, alone, fragile, and fighting back tears, that tugged at his heart. He walked closer, his sneakers soft against the marble, and gently lowered himself onto the couch beside her. She flinched slightly, startled, and turned her head. Her eyes were wide and glistening, rimmed with red from holding back emotion. "Hey," Liam said softly, his voice cautious but warm. "Are you okay?" The girl blinked quickly, her throat working, but no words came. She looked away, hugging her arms tightly around herself. Liam didn't push. He remembered how sometimes silence said more than words could. He sat there quietly, glancing at her now and then, waiting. And then it happened. A memory sparked inside him, his mother's voice, gentle and melodic, teaching him phrases late at night when she tucked him in. Spanish, she called it, her favorite language. After she passed, those words were all he had left of her, and though he hadn't used them in a long while, they still lived inside him, stitched into his heart. Without really thinking, he whispered, "Estás bien?" The girl's head snapped toward him. Her eyes widened, surprise flickering across her face like sunlight breaking through clouds. Liam hesitated, then continued, "No tienes que estar sola. You don't have to be alone." Her lips parted, the first sign of life breaking through the anxious shell she'd wrapped around herself. You speak Spanish?" she asked in a shaky voice, her accent stumbling but clear enough. "A little," Liam admitted, shrugging. "My mom used to teach me." She didn't finish. "But I remember some." The girl's eyes shimmered again, though this time not with tears of despair. It was something else, recognition, maybe even relief. She inhaled shakily, her chest rising as though a weight had just been lifted. "My mom, she spoke Spanish too. But," her voice cracked, breaking under the weight of memory. "She's gone." Liam's heart ached at her words, echoing his own story. He nodded slowly. "Mine too." For a long moment, silence stretched between them. But it wasn't the heavy silence from before. It was softer, gentler, almost like a blanket wrapping around them both. Two children who had lost pieces of themselves sat together, suddenly connected by threads neither could explain. Then, Liam smiled a little, trying to ease the heaviness. "Do you wanna practice with me? I only know some words. Like, lose. That means light." The girl sniffled, the faintest trace of a smile tugging at her lips. "Lose," she repeated, her voice shaky but steadier now. "Yeah." Liam nodded eagerly. "And, esperanza. That means hope." Her eyes brightened. She repeated it carefully, her tongue wrapping around the unfamiliar sound. Esperanza. Something inside her seemed to shift. Her breathing slowed, her shoulders relaxed. For the first time that night, she didn't feel so small, so invisible. They spent the next few minutes trading words, clumsy, broken, half-remembered phrases. She would repeat after him, sometimes giggling at her own mistakes, sometimes whispering so quietly it was barely audible. But every word seemed to pull her further away from the fear and anxiety that had gripped her, and closer to something warmer, something that felt like home. "Thank you," she finally said, her voice fragile but sincere. "I thought I forgot her. My mom. I thought the language was gone." But, hearing it again, even just little words, she trailed off, but her eyes told the rest of the story. Liam didn't know what to say. He just nodded, his own throat tight with unspoken emotion. He understood more than she could know. Sometimes, a single word could feel like a hand reaching out from the past, a reminder that love didn't vanish, not really. The girl straightened a little, wiping her cheeks. "My name's Emma. I'm Liam," he replied. And then, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, Emma whispered, "Gracias, Liam." The simple phrase carried more weight than any elaborate thank you ever could. It wasn't just gratitude for his company, it was for the spark of memory, the connection, the piece of her mother she thought she'd lost forever. Liam smiled. "De nada, Emma." The two of them sat side by side on that enormous leather couch, two children from completely different worlds, bound together by loss but also by the fragile, powerful thread of language and kindness. Outside, the city lights glittered, but inside that vast, lonely lobby, something brighter had just been rekindled: Esperanza, hope. The click of heels echoed across the marble floor long before Emma's mother appeared. She moved quickly, her blazer sharp, her phone still in hand, her eyes scanning over an email as though the words were heavier than bricks. To her, every second was a negotiation, every glance a deal to be won or lost. But tonight, when she entered the lobby, she froze. Her daughter was not curled up with anxious tears the way she usually was after waiting for hours. Instead, Emma was sitting upright, her face lifted, her lips forming sounds her mother hadn't heard in years. Soft syllables, careful but clear, slipped out of her mouth. "Esperanza," Emma said with a quiet smile. "Hope." Her mother's breath caught. The phone slid slowly down to her side as if her hand no longer had the strength to hold it. Her eyes blinked rapidly, trying to process the impossible. She had not heard Emma speak Spanish since her late wife had passed away. Emma had been so young then, too young to remember more than scattered fragments. That piece of her, of them, was something she thought had been buried with the woman she loved. Now here it was again, alive in her daughter's trembling voice. Emma turned toward her mother, her cheeks still damp with the remnants of earlier tears, but her eyes, her eyes glowed with a light the CEO hadn't seen in far too long. "Mama," she whispered, "Liam taught me." The woman's gaze shifted to the boy beside her daughter. A boy with tousled brown hair, hand-me-down sneakers, and a quiet strength in the way he sat. He looked down, shyly, not boasting, not demanding praise. Just present, humble, almost hesitant to be noticed. She recognized him. Daniel's son, the janitor's boy. The CEO blinked again, confusion and awe colliding in her chest. You know Spanish?" she asked gently, her voice trembling in a way it never did in boardrooms. "Some," Liam admitted, his voice small. "My mom used to teach me before she passed." He glanced at Emma, then back at her mother. "I just thought maybe it could help." She looked sad. The CEO's throat tightened. The boy's words cut deeper than any speech she had heard in a conference room. They weren't dressed in business polish, they were raw, pure. He hadn't just spoken to Emma, he had given her back something she thought she had lost forever. Her knees suddenly felt weak, and for the first time in years, she let herself kneel, lowering her tall, commanding frame to the level of the children. She reached out with trembling hands, resting one on Emma's shoulder, the other brushing lightly against Liam's arm. "You don't know what you've done," she whispered, tears spilling freely now. Emma smiled faintly, leaning into her mother's embrace. "He made me remember, Mama." For a long moment, silence filled the lobby, but it wasn't heavy or suffocating. It was sacred, as though the walls themselves were holding the moment safe. The CEO pressed her forehead gently to her daughter's, inhaling the scent of her hair, her heart breaking and mending at once. Then she turned her gaze to Liam again, her eyes shining with something she hadn't felt in years, gratitude so raw it hurt. "You gave her back her mother," she said softly. "Words I thought were gone forever. You gave her hope." Liam looked down, embarrassed by the weight of her words. "I just remembered what my mom taught me," he murmured. "And I wanted her to feel better." The CEO's heart twisted. Here was a child who had lost so much, yet still chose to give, still chose to comfort. Not with money, not with power, but with kindness. She glanced up and saw Daniel in the distance, standing frozen near his cart, watching the scene with uncertainty, mop still in hand. His expression was guarded, as though he feared this moment might collapse if anyone breathed too loudly. The CEO rose slowly, still holding Emma close, and walked toward Daniel. She stopped just a few feet away, her heels no longer clicking with authority but pausing with humility. "Your son," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "just reminded me of what matters most. He gave my daughter something I couldn't buy, something I couldn't fight for in all the meetings I've been trapped in." She looked at Liam again, her eyes softening. "He gave her peace." Daniel swallowed hard, his rough hands tightening on the handle of his mop. "He's got his mother's heart," he said quietly, voice catching. "She always believed words could heal." The CEO nodded, tears still shimmering on her cheeks. And she was right. For the first time in her career-driven life, she let the mask slip. No CEO, no armor, no walls, just a mother standing across from a father, both bound by loss, both unexpectedly connected by their children. She placed a hand gently on Daniel's arm. "You've raised him well, and I want to help you. Not out of charity, but out of respect. Families like yours remind me what true wealth looks like." Daniel's eyes widened, unsure how to respond. He had never asked for help, never wanted pity. But the sincerity in her voice left no room for pride. He simply nodded, his throat too tight to form words. Emma, still clutching Liam's hand, looked between the adults with a smile that carried more hope than she had felt in years. She whispered another word in Spanish, one Liam had taught her minutes before. "Amigos, friends." The CEO's lips curved into a trembling smile. She repeated it softly, then added, "Familia." Liam's face lit up. He repeated it too, his young voice strong, echoing in the vast lobby. That night didn't end with contracts or polished speeches. It ended with three people standing in a circle, two children holding hands, two parents realizing that sometimes the most profound transformations happen not in boardrooms but in quiet lobbies, with words that carry love across loss. And as they finally walked out of the building, Emma's head resting against her mother's side and Liam holding his father's hand, one truth lingered in the air like a promise. Even in the darkest hours, kindness could build bridges stronger than any empire, and the language of compassion was one the whole world could understand.